Welcome to the Leadership with Vision podcast by Austin Gardner. For more information and resources, visit worldevangelism.net.
Well, we are here with you again, Leadership with Vision. We are talking about what Nunez said, talking from the Central American Theological Seminary in Guatemala. And I've got Jeff Bush here with me as usual. And we're discussing his advice to people who would be working as missionaries in Latin America, but it works for anybody. And so, Jeff, would you like to give a greeting today?
Well, we started this discussion before. We're going to continue it. I think it's very profitable. I think sometimes, we do things without knowing. So this is kind of a warning, but this is also a time to maybe help, encourage, and hear from a little bit of every side, how you could be more effective on the mission field and love those people God sent you to.
This list is out of a book, and I will try to get you a footnote for that. But anyway, learn our language well. Our sayings and proverbs, our youth slang, if appropriate, our subjunctive, our regional and national accents. So one of the things Nunez says is y'all need to learn how to speak our language.
I think wherever you go, for example, in Latin America, so they all speak Spanish, but every one of them, every country has their own little quirks to it, wrong or different or right in every city.
Like in Argentina, how they can't really speak Spanish, right?
I knew that was coming out.
In Spanish, you say siéntate. What do you guys say?
That's the same thing we say.
No, you say sentate.
Right, we say it the right way. And so you dear friend, or wherever you're at.
We're actually following the Spanish rules, the Spanish pronunciation, but Argentines have their own way of doing it. And that's great. Jeff learned that, and he learned to talk like that. We don't even, there are things he says I don't even understand. And that's a good thing. Learn the language, learn to do it as best you can without a foreign accent. You're probably going to have an accent, but you got to get rid of it as much as you can. Next, let's read about their heroes. We've talked about that before, but you ought to know who's on their money. What's it about? Learn all you can about their national heroes so that when they mention Bolivar or when they mention whoever, you'd say, yeah, I know about that.
There's, in Argentina, they've got, just like we would have our Mark Twain or, Abraham Lincoln, they have their poets. They have even Paul mentioned in Colossians, right? Just like they say, he's mentioning that he knew the story, the history, and it would be good that we know about their culture, about their history, things about that impresses, that helps, and it helps you understand how they think. In Latin America, we have their humor is different, but if you understand that humor, you understand what they say and think, it sure helps when you're talking to people.
Be willing to accept our suggestions, he said. They may hurt, but we want to help, and you have to accept them with humility. Proverbs 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. So you want to learn to listen to their suggestions. Don't go down there thinking you're high and mighty and you know everything. No one likes a know-it-all.
In general, it's not easy for any of us to accept, whether it be reproach or correction or advice, counsel, but we have to, and especially there, because they obviously know a lot more than we do.
Watch the way you speak. They're very sensitive to the tone of voice, the choice of words. This guy even says about Spanish people, we are touchy people. And that is so true. I was standing out with a missionary in Peru, and he was talking to a guy, and the first thing he did was jump off into what he wanted to say. And the guy said, hey, man, we're not animals. We greet each other. We ask how we're doing. We treat people with dignity and respect. And if you don't do that, they're sensitive. You need to learn how they greet.
You can either become upset about it and say, what a bunch of babies, for crying out loud, just get to the point and say it. Or you can become aware of how they are, attentive to it, and you will probably get a lot farther that way.
So they're more diplomatic. To them, Americans seem cold and distant. We don't tend to ask about the family and the personal life. Yet yesterday, the reason I got a phone call from my friend that taught me Spanish was he'd heard about an earthquake in Arequipa and was out in the country, but he called to find out, how is our family in Arequipa? That's just how they are. They're much more, diplomatic, loving, open, and you need to learn to be like that to be one of them.
Almost like the Apostle Paul starting a letter, grace be to you, we remember you, we love you, we're always praying for you, and you're like, come on, Paul, get to the point. What do you want to say to these guys? Well, they're pretty much the same way. That was
God doing the talking, And he used the culture, but it's very good. That's an extremely good point, brother. The Nunez says, learn to touch us appropriately. Americans we're like, keep your distance. I guard my personal space. An American needs at least 1.5 feet, 2 feet of personal space. A Latin American could get within 6 or 8 inches of your face and not think he was invading your personal space. They're going to touch you, put their hand on you. It's a different way of thinking.
I remember so many times in Latin America, at least in Argentina, we would sit very close and even put your arm around somebody. It was absolutely normal. Well, that was all normal to me, although it was different for an American. But I remember leaving South America while I was still there, and I traveled over to West Africa. And I remember in the airport looking, and 2 adult men police officers, well, there was 3 adult men police officers, they were holding hands as they were walking. I thought, you gotta be kidding me. Well, that was the way they showed affection. There was nothing weird about them at all.
That's not homosexual in that culture.
Not at all.
But so we need to learn to adapt to where we are. Even down to sometimes you'll be like carrying what an American might call a purse. The money won't fit in a wallet. It takes too much money to get stuff done. Any of that, you just need to adapt to the culture. Don't go in there thinking you're better than them. I was taught, and I'm sure you were, you don't look up to anybody, you don't look down on anybody, you look straight ahead to everybody. Be equal to, not better than or worse than.
We're co-equal. We're not better than. They have as much God as we do. If they're children of God, they're as much human as we are. We don't want to enter into that racism thing at all.
And be sure to develop serious, deep friendships. Be transparent. Be vulnerable. Take time. Time is life. And spend time with them. Talk about intimate things and ideas and topics. Get close to them. Be so close to them that even the Americans think you're being too close to them. Love the people.
I believe when you really do have deep friendships with them, it will make it feel more like home. It'll make it feel better because you will now have stronger ties to that country. And so don't be afraid. Encourage your wife, encourage your children. Have friendships there. You need that. They'll teach you, they'll help you. And all of us, God didn't make any of us to be a hermit. God made us to, we are beings that we have to have that fellowship. So have good, don't be the racist. Have good fellowship with them.
And, it's not just saying you love somebody. It's showing it. So sometimes a missionary learns hypocritical church talk and like, I love you, we love you, we love being here, but they can tell you don't. Be very careful that you show by your actions, your face, your the way you live, that you love the people and love their country.
Another thing that Nunez said was, show us that you lovingly expect much from us without coming across as paternalistic chief.
Yeah, in other words, you're not there to boss them around, but you do expect them to be used of God. You do expect great things from them. You do have big ideas about what's going to happen, and so it's not a matter of jerking them around. It's a matter of the same thing I would expect from my children, the same thing I would expect if I were pastoring in America.
A good teacher would expect something from his or her students, but they would also teach in a way that's a respectful way, not looking down on them, not treating them dumb. Well, same thing where you're teaching the Bible, and so make sure that you teach it in the right way.
Make disciples among them. Make disciples among them. That's the whole key. Train men. That's what we would push so much. That's all we talk about. But to do that, you're going to have to really get close to them, and you're going to have to leave something there where they really love you and want to be like you. You not believe this, but one of our missionaries recently told me they named a church after him. So the church is going to be named Jacob Baptist Church.
Lord have
mercy. So that's like they made the comment. Well, we want our church to have many sons like our missionary does. Now it's a little over the top, but I've got Peruvians that have actually been named Austin, which I think that's crazy because they can't even say the name. But the whole point is you want to make and leave disciples. You want them to love you.
Throw in a quick caution here. You cannot be reproducible. They cannot be like you unless you are human. In other words, don't make every story about you are the hero. Don't say everything like, well, in my perfect marriage or in my perfect life, or, be open with them. Let them see, hey, man, you need help from the Savior just like they do. Be reproducible by being human to them.
Very good point. A missionary told me when I got to Peru, if you reject the food, you reject the culture. If you reject the culture, you reject the people. And Nunez said, eat and like our food, not just Pizza Hut and McDonald's. We also also like to know what you eat. So it's not that you have to not eat your food, but you need to learn to like the food that they prepare.
I've seen so many times in various countries when you like something from that country, it's almost like it excites and it makes the people happy because they're like, yeah, he likes some of our food instead of just liking the normal pizza, hamburger mentality, French fries from the United States.
Learn to dress like them. In other words, try to adapt even in clothing. Try to adapt in the way you handle time. Try to adapt in the music, that you would learn to like their music, their instruments, so that you could really feel like these are worthy people and I love them and I appreciate them.
Drop the term pounds, miles. Learn to give weights, distances in kilos or kilometers or what they're meters or whatever they're using.
We don't like that because we're Americans, and bless God, we use miles and feet and inches and pounds and ounces, and we don't like the metric system. It's a one world government, whatever it is you're saying. But the truth is, if you want to adapt to that, they will know very quickly that you do not love them like you should. So I would like to challenge you to be very careful to try to adapt the best way you can, even in learn how to use kilometers. It's not that hard. 1 kilometer is about 0.6 of a mile. So I would always, if I said 100 kilometers, I drop the last digit and multiply by 6. So 100 kilometers is approximately 60 miles. It's actually more like 62 or 3 miles, but it's close enough. And so if you'll learn, you can learn to adapt, and still your mind's going to take a while before you get used to it. But if you're driving 100 kilometers an hour and it's 100 kilometers where you're going, you can learn to think. Actually, the metric system works really good.
It is very interesting after we started learning the way that they weigh and the measurements and all these different things. A whole lot of the ins and outs of the country, it actually makes a lot of sense. And you will find out that maybe it even makes more sense than some of the things that we do. So using them shows that you're one of them, and it actually teaches you a lot by using those things.
So, in other words, try to adapt and learn how tall you are in meters. Learn how much you weigh in meters. Learn how far it is from your house to there in meters. Learn to use their measurements so that when they say them, it doesn't confuse you. And so you want to adapt. So work at that as best as you can.
Another thing he says is struggle honestly with our struggles, talking about social, historical, cultural, church, Christian life. Don't give us, your capitalistic answers is what he says. Don't reduce our societal problems to simplistic spiritual solutions. In other words, when there's a problem, think how they think. Don't just put your American mindset on like, oh, come on, for crying out loud. If you guys would just get a democratic government or whatever, you could fix all this. This is stupid. That's what, don't do that. You are on their turf. You're in their country. So think like they would and understand and help them realize or see what's going on. Don't think like the typical American.
Can you understand how different it is to be one of them? I think I may have mentioned this somewhere along the way because we talk so much and so things come up over and over. But in Ica, I saw a statue of a conquistador on a horse, and the Inca Indian was on the ground. The horse had his foot on his chest and a spear to his throat. And what they were doing was showing how they feel about the Spanish. The Spanish people came over and took over and mistreated them horribly in their past. And so you want to learn to think more like they think and understand life from their point of view.
Another thing would be to learn to read the Bible from our perspective and our culture.
Can I just mention, for those of you listening, I would love to see you read Booker T. Washington's life story.
Amen.
I would love to see you, that's Up from Slavery, right?
Yes, sir.
Up from Slavery. I would love to see you read Buried in Bitter Waters, which is about the racism that took place even in my county. It would help you because if you could get into the heart of a black person and know how black people were treated, if you could learn to think like them, then it would help you learn to adapt. There's another book that I highly like, and it's got lots of
Black Like Me?
Curse words. And yeah, Black Like Me. But a white man painted himself black and lived among the black people, and he learned what it felt like to be black, and it was horrible for him. And so another one I love is Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Yes.
It helps you understand what it feels like to not be the rich, capitalistic white guy. And that's the whole point. Get inside of them. And so even that's going to affect the way you read the Bible, because you'll start thinking in terms of how they read the Bible. See, people that have different backgrounds see things differently. They feel differently because of where they've been and what they've been through. And so things speak to them differently. And so try to become one of them and understand them as much as you possibly can.
I echo all those books. Man, it would be so great to, if you could read those, if you could look at those. So many people have looked down upon others. I mean, the way, even if you want to go the route, the way that the Nazis treated the Jews, or you want to go the route, and how Corrie ten Boom helped them, or if you want to go route that how Americans treated the native Indian, whatever it is. But sadly, many missionaries look down upon and treat the people in that country bad. We have no right to do that. Better yet, when we have the gospel, Lord have mercy, never do that. So yeah, those would be.
And we've learned to do that because of our culture. And so we tend to think that we're superior because we're American. We tend to think that because they're from a third world country, they're not as smart as us. We tend to think because they don't speak English, they're not as smart as us. And none of that's true. And so you've got to get that out of your head. So learn to get inside of them. Remember, Jesus became a man and he lived among us and he became one of us. And he did it so much that no one even understood that he wasn't a Jew. So be careful that you do change your attitude and your heart towards the people.
Let me throw in one more quick thing. I think it's in Uncle Tom's Cabin where the slaves at this time, they're trying to get free. And he says, how come is it that white people stand up and they say they've got politics on their side, and they even use the Bible on their side, saying that God commends all that they're doing, and yet they mistreat us? And so many times missionaries, we say we've got God on our side, but yet we're mistreating God's creation. That should never, ever happen.
So true. And I just wish you'd read the Bible from a perspective. You know, the Jews were a mistreated people, and go through the book of Exodus, look how Pharaoh treated them, look at a lot of the things that happened to them, and I think you'll understand some of that. Well, remember that we think differently than you do, Nunez said. Our problem solving is different from yours. Learn how we do it. So, we tend to have what they call linear reasoning. Some of them have circular reasoning. We have a guy on our missionary team that actually says, let me ask you the same question in 2 or 3 different ways, which is just the way he thinks, not the way I think. He's Asian. I think that's funny. But we got to learn that they don't arrive at the same. They can arrive at the same truth, but their thinking system may be different.
If you don't understand that, it will frustrate the fire out of you. You're like, well, you guys, you're driving me nuts. So you can either get frustrated, which leads to phooey on you. I ain't working with you guys. Or you can say, okay, it's a little bit different way of doing things, and understand it so that you can better teach and invest in their lives.
Well, the other thing Nunez said is come stay with us for a long time. Short terms are shortcuts many times. And you know what you need? It takes a long time to even get worked into the system. And here I am sitting in the States as a missionary, ex-missionary. I was in Peru only 18 years, 1 year in Mexico. And so I could have stayed even longer. I really felt like the Lord led me back. But the whole deal is this thing of running to the field for a month and teaching them, that's a pretty arrogant attitude. You don't understand them. You haven't moved in with them. You haven't learned from them. You haven't learned to think like the other country. Long term is the answer.
Short-term mission trips are great to let people see with the end in mind that they can become missionaries and give their lives. But you're not going to learn anything if you don't stay with them, you don't live with them, you don't invest in them.
At the same time, he said, be bold enough to examine whether or not you should stay in Latin America as a missionary. Perhaps so you should return home, particularly if you can adjust here, or do not know why you came, or you're having serious family problems, or you cannot work with us. He said, go home.
Lord have mercy, those are strong words.
Yes, they are, but it's true, isn't it? If you're going to be a missionary, you've got to get the right attitude. You got to get the right heart. You got to get your family life under control. You got to adjust. You got to learn to love it. If you are just counting down the days till you can leave, you really don't belong. So either get that right or go ahead and get out.
You know, this sounds very harsh, and I don't necessarily mean it to be, but if you don't belong on the mission field, and the fact that you're not going to work the hours that you should work, you're going to use your family or the fears as an excuse, or you're not going to love the people, save church's money and return right now. Because this thing about serving God, it takes a real man to do it. It takes somebody. I mean, we are going to have to swallow our pride. We are going to have to learn things. We are going to have to spend a lot of time, and it's all worth it But man, it takes a lot. And so I would encourage you, I'm not trying to get you off the field, but I am saying maybe it's time to make a commitment. If we are light on commitment, then we don't need to be in God's service. We need to make a commitment to stick and go with it all the way.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for listening. And Nunez brought some good points that I think you can apply, and I hope you will. Thank you for listening. Jeff, you have any final words?
Nope. Just want to encourage you one more time. Jump on our webpage, worldevangelism.net. You'll find a whole lot of good articles, things that will help you, specific things. Or as you're listening to these, why don't you even reply back, write us, and we would love to address something or help out or, maybe clarify something that wasn't so clear.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, and God bless each and every one of you.
You've been listening to Leadership with Vision by Austin Gardner. Visit worldevangelism.net to discover more podcasts and useful articles.